Hello and welcome to a very special webinar put together by the Quint and Global Health Strategies. It's called Justice on Our Plates, Reimagining India's Fight Against Malnutrition. Now, we are of course living in very, very strange times where the global focus is on mitigation and control of the pandemic set off by the novel coronavirus. But in the midst of all of this, we've lost count of other global health niche issues that need the attention and that need the conversation to be focused on them as well. And when it comes to India, for us, malnutrition remains right on top. When 69% deaths in under 5 children is linked to malnutrition, this has to be an issue that has to be, consistently spoken about and addressed and reimagined in the current scenario. Government's flagship programs like the Poshan Abhiyan and National Nutrition Mission have had some success, but even before the pandemic, there were doubts about whether we meet our global targets. And then comes the pandemic, where our distribution systems are disrupted, our supply chain is disrupted. There's this whole break in the chain of getting the food and important nutrition to children and to women and to pregnant women. And so, to address all of these very complex issues arisen due to the global pandemic, Global Health Strategies got together and curated an excellent issue for the seminar magazine. It was called Justice on Our Plate, and some of our excellent panelists for joining us today have written on that issue. So before we go ahead with more details on the seminar, I want to make a quick round of introductions, and so let's start right away. I've got Dr. R.Hemalatha with us. She leads ICMR's famed National Institute of Nutrition. Welcome, Dr. Hemalatha. We also have Mr. Arjan. He's the Chief of Nutrition with UNICEF India. He spent a considerable time in Africa addressing nutrition issues before he joined us here in India.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, sir. We are also joined by Dr. Ambrish Mithal. He's, of course, a very well-known endocrinologist, and he's also the chairman and head of division Endocrinology and Diabetes at Max Hospital. In this seminar issue, he's spoken about fighting hidden hunger, and the focus is on micronutrients and food fortification. Welcome, Dr. Mithal. We are also joined by Rasmi Avula. She's a research fellow with International Food Policy Research Institute. She speaks on the needs and benefits of integrating technology for nutrition service delivery. So welcome, Rasmi. Yeah. And finally, we're also joined by Dr. Alok Ranjan. He's the country lead nutrition Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Dr. Ranjan, in his essay in the seminar, has highlighted the importance of streamlining and converging various nutrition strategies to get the best results going. Welcome, Dr. Ranjan.
Thank you, Anjali.
So, before we go ahead, of course, we are joined by two people from Global Health Strategies who made this webinar and the seminar issue possible. Anjali Nair joins us. She is the Executive Vice President with Global Health Strategies. Welcome, Anjali.
Thank you.
And we're also joined by Nidhi Dubey. Nidhi is the Senior Vice President with Global Health Strategies. Thanks for joining us, Nidhi.
Thanks, Vaishali.
So before we set off, I want to ask Anjali if she can talk to us about why we thought about putting this seminar issue together in the midst of the pandemic. What were the challenges that you and your team went through, and if you can highlight why this issue is so significant despite the pandemic that we are facing right now.
Thank you so much, Vaishali. First of all, I just want to thank you, QuintFit, particularly Tejbir and Mala Singh of our seminar, of giving us this opportunity to put together this issue, and then QuintFit to help us sharing it with a much wider audience. I cannot tell you how important this issue is, although everyone has been joining several webinars, but this particular webinar is important. And I would encourage everyone, if they can, I'll have Suchi share the link of the seminar, and I would like everyone to read it. two particular reasons. One, Seminar is a very exceptional magazine. It's a cross between journal and magazine. And what it does is takes an issue and it gives a 360-degree perspective, looks at different aspects of it, and also encourages debate and discussion around that particular issue. And that's why, given that there are so many aspects to nutrition, the saying is very true. We are what we eat. But very few people recognize the importance of nutrition. Very few people recognize the underlying socio-economic, political, and even budgetary challenges that really make nutrition and nutrition outcomes successful. Also, there is new evidence, there is new thinking on micronutrient malnutrition, which Dr. Ambrish Mithal has been really advocating to address. There are strategies to address that. There is also very interesting thinking about nutrition and food systems. Now, of course, with the pandemic, we're going back to food security, micronutrient malnutrition, as well as looking at some urgent evidence of hunger. So, which is why justice on our plates as the seminar issue has become so critical. And again, I thank you for making this issue live through Quint as well as through Facebook.
Thank you so much, Anjali. So I just want to take everyone through all the rules and the way we're going to conduct this webinar. What I'll do is I'll come to each one of our panelists one by one and ask them to speak about their issues and the questions that I have related to that. And we'll open up the conversation, we'll open up for questions at the end of this, once everyone's spoken. So those of us who are joining us who are not the panelists, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A and we'll come to you as we're ready for taking in audience questions. So to start off right away, Dr. Hemalatha, I want to start with you, and I want to ask you, in your article, in your seminar essay, you've spoken about taking a holistic approach towards malnutrition. You've spoken about how malnutrition impacts women and girls disproportionately. I want to ask you, do we need to look at malnutrition from a gender perspective and the broader issue of malnutrition, how it impacts girls and women differently? Dr. Hemalatha? I think you're muted, Dr. Hemalatha. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, coming to this issues, holistic nutrition, and why we have to be a little more careful when it comes to women nutrition. Yes, risk due to maternal malnutrition in India has been one of the highest during the 60s. We have made great progress, and now it has decreased by 64.3% of the last 15 years, more than a decade. Nevertheless, it continues to be a public health problem, and it is a leading risk factor for health loss for all age groups in the country, even today. So coming to this 1,000 days nutrition, optimal nutrition and health of women and infants during the 1,000 days, that is right from conception to the first 2 years of the age of the child, has been identified as a very important critical window of opportunity during which period intervention is going to give a lot of dividends and benefits to us. And it impacts growth of the child, not only growth, even the learning ability of the child, and also earning potential. And also it has been shown to increase risk for diabetes, cardiovascular diseases, particularly ischemic heart disease and stroke, etc. And therefore it has quite a lot of impact on the household income and also the gross domestic product of the country, and impacting the income of the country as well. And typically our diets are far short of actually recommended. And this is more worrisome when it comes to women and girls, because even the future generation is impacted. If you want to tell, do I have 3 more minutes?
Yes, please.
Do I have few?
You do, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Yeah. pregnant woman who is undernourished and who has micronutrient deficiencies, see the body, the homeostatic mechanism of the body is such that the body automatically diverts the nutrients to more important thing. The most important thing for any living thing is life. So when the nutrients are limited, first it is diverted and the child stops growing. I mean, when the woman is undernourished and when the woman is micronutrient deficient, the nutrients are diverted from growth of the baby to more important functions like growth of organs, metabolism, etc. So the child becomes shorter and thinner. But after that, when nutrition deficiency continues, it impacts the organs. For example, many vital organs like kidney, liver, etc. And then finally, it also goes to the brain development and growth. So what happens is a short and thin baby, and then it may also affect the metabolism because various organ development is impacted, and finally, if it impacts brain, then memory also can get impacted. So all this again phenotypically presents as poor learning ability and poor earning ability as adults and higher risk for hypertension, diabetes. Why? Because hypertension, diabetes, etc. And you also, if you then most of this is because of micronutrient deficiencies, because micronutrient deficiencies result in inflammation, that is very well known, and inflammation is the underlying pathogenesis of most of the chronic non-communicable diseases. That I'll come to little later when you ask me about NCDs. But the point here is, what is holistic approach? See, when it comes to nutrition during pregnancy, time and again it has been shown the undernourished and micronutrient deficient women, if supplemented with the nutrition or micronutrients, most of it is not reaching the baby, but it improves the nutrition status of the woman. Okay, so more than half of the women in our country are malnourished when they enter pregnancy. In the sense, malnourished means it's not just undernutrition. It also includes overweight, obesity, and it also includes micronutrient deficiencies. About 20% women in urban area are overweight, obese, and also nearly 50% are having abdominal adiposity. All these contributes to adverse impact on the growing fetus. It's undernutrition, micronutrient deficiencies. Overweight, obese women also have micronutrient deficiencies. What I mean to say here is, most of the programs are very robust and the government invests a lot on these programs. But then 1,000 days means it actually starts acting when the woman is already 8 to 10 weeks pregnancy. Even among the educated women, reports only at 10 weeks, 8 weeks pregnancy. The least will be 8 to 10 weeks. By that time, most of the organs are already developed, rudimentary stages already formed, imprinting is already occurring because all these cells are rapidly proliferating. So what I mean to say is preconception period also should be given. That is, when woman enters pregnancy, that is before conception itself, we have to pay attention to improve the nutrition status of the woman. So this is important, and on this line, NIN has developed a preconception card which tries to address the need for the parents to understand the significance and importance of nutrition and health.
Dr. Hemalatha, I think we seem to have lost her. I'll come back to her. I do want her to talk about non-communicable diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, and its interlinkages with malnutrition. But before we get Dr. Hemalatha back, I want to go to Mr. Arjan. Dr. Wagt, one of the things that's being said about the pandemic, you say that children are not impacted by the disease as much, but there's a hidden impact. Children are the hidden victims of the pandemic in that sense. There's a Lancet report that says 1.2 billion children will be impacted by the pandemic going forward. So if you could talk to us about how, what would a pandemic like this do to children and children-focused programs in a country like ours? Right. I think we can go ahead with Dr. Wagt. We'll come back to Dr. Hemalatha when her screen is all right. Hello.
You want me to come in now? Eh?
Yes. Would you want me to?
No, I got the question. No, I just was waiting for the colleague. No, thank you so much. And first of all, congratulations to you and the team for organizing this. Also, the seminar about nutrition was excellent. Congratulations a lot. about your question, and you see it, I try to put it also behind me. For me, this is such a moment. This is my life. UNICEF, working to address COVID, but also to address malnutrition. Those two go at the moment hand in hand. You referred to a Lancet article. There was another Lancet article that came out last week. They've done some new modeling, and the modeling showed that, for instance, in South Asia, they expect an additional almost 4 million children having wasting. And wasting is that they're really too thin, and it's the most dangerous form of malnutrition. Deaths due to malnutrition are often linked to wasting. Well, out of the 4 million in South Asia, well, we know the population and the spread of the countries in the population in South Asia. A significant proportion of those will be in India. We see basically, I think about 3 pathways how we see how COVID is impacting on nutrition. Of course, we have the increasing poverty. People are losing jobs, people are losing income, resulting to increasing food insecurity, and that then resulting into poorer nutrition, poorer diets, and malnutrition. We also see that access to services has been affected. Of course, very, very strong in March and April when there was a lockdown. But even up to now, we see that while there is some returning of services, even where services are coming back, we see that the uptake of services, the reach of services, is still not there. Yeah, so while there might be nutrition rehabilitation centers where severely malnourished children are being treated, while they might be reopening, or while we see that take-home rations are being distributed, or we see that vitamin A supplements are being distributed again, the initial data that is coming out is that still the coverage is way below where we were. The third pathway for me, and that is related to me, to this amazing portion Arjan. I have not worked in any country before in my last 25 years career where a prime minister launches a national policy program and then starts delivering it on it like it was done in India. The media was talking about Sunday about nutrition. All the ministries were talking about nutrition. Chief ministers, district collectors, communities, we had Portion Ma, we had Portion Pakwada, reaching not millions or tens of millions, which I'm used to, but in India, it was reaching hundreds of millions of people. I've never seen a Jan Angelen, I've never seen that kind of level of leadership, additional investment happening after the launch of a policy or a strategy in any country before. But it's said that since mid-March, the media is not talking about nutrition as much anymore. The leadership is not talking about nutrition as much anymore. And actually we are afraid that because of these 3 pathways, a lot of the efforts made and achieved, not just efforts, a lot of the achievements made in the last 5 years or 2.5 years since Posha began will be lost. Data, including from the Comprehensive National Nutrition Survey compared with NFHS 4, which was done 2 years before that, or NFHS 3, which was done 10 years before that, started showing started suggesting an accelerated reduction of malnutrition in India. And we really had great hopes that we were on the right track with the additional investment, additional response. So we are really worried that because of the COVID, we are going to do several steps back. And it is not needed. It's not about new creativity or new innovation. I would basically say that we need a COVID-sensitive portion, Abidjan. Yeah, it is about the same programs. It's about the same services. It is still about iron folate tablets to pregnant women, vitamin A supplements to the young children. It's about take-home ration through the ICDS system. It's still the same programs, but we have to deliver them such that we don't spread COVID. It can be done. We have a lot of examples where frontline workers, communities, districts and states have come up with approaches to revitalize the service delivery. Good guidelines have come out from central level government, but now it's really about the implementation of this program. And as UNICEF, as the United Nations, but I think Delhi also as development partners, and I think the government and India as a whole, we're worried that if we don't do that, we will not only have the COVID crisis to deal with, we will also have to deal with a COVID-induced food insecurity and a malnutrition crisis. And in that way, really doing several steps back in a short time that might take another decade to compensate again. Thank you very much.
Right, I mean, the pandemics have already been around 6 months and that impact has already been felt at the ground level. But there are also certain health policies that have come into place, certain systems that have been pushed into place because of COVID. And there are these newer strategies being implemented to address COVID in various parts of the states. Is there a scope? Is there any learning in this space? Is there any learning in our response to COVID that we can apply to nutrition programs as we come out of it?
What we see increasingly, we see some of the responses going together. Yeah, we have seen that when frontline workers started going, and that were frontline workers, were the ASHA workers, the Anganwadi workers. Very quickly, they started being engaged in promotion and of awareness around COVID. We also see it the other way around. At the moment, we are in the middle of breastfeeding week. Yeah, breastfeeding week is 1 week per year where we intensify creating awareness about breastfeeding. But I find it fascinating that this awareness is not only about breastfeeding, it's also about COVID. It's about breastfeeding and COVID. It's the prevention of COVID. So you see the systems having that flexibility to combine these things.
Right.
I think that from the government side, the government has done it, let's be honest, I mean, there's so much more to be done, but even at the COVID response, in such a short time, with an issue that we've never dealt with before, tremendous progress has been made. Yeah, and congratulations to everyone. There's so many COVID champions in India. The same time, we also see that at the end of May, the Ministry of Health issued guidelines for continuity of routine health services, the priority health services. So the government and its ministries do recognize that it's not only about COVID prevention and management of COVID. Besides preventing COVID, we also need to ensure that children are not going to die of malnutrition or childhood illnesses, because otherwise you might save one child but lose the other child. So I think the guidance is there, the understanding is there. It's very much the implementation at the moment and partly the prioritization. If I look, I've been in India now for 3.5 years. In my first half year, I was monitoring the media. Maybe once or twice a week, there was an article about nutrition. Then Poshan Arjan came, and everybody was talking about nutrition. And that really created a buzz. It recreated energy, enthusiasm. It created awareness of the issue. And if you now look at the last 5 months, nutrition is much less there. I see it coming up again in the last months, where people recognize, wait a minute, it's not only COVID. We cannot save a child from COVID, but having it dying because of malnutrition. Yeah, so I've got good hopes, but it really requires finding that right balance between the COVID response and the essential services that children, women, fathers, mothers, communities need.
Right. Thank you so much. I'm going to come back to you with some more questions, but I want to now take Dr. Mithal in. Dr. Mithal, in your essay, you've spoken about micronutrients as magic wands, and you've spoken about how they're essential to tackle malnutrition in this country. When we talk about malnutrition, it's not just about getting food to children, but it's also about getting them micronutrient-rich food. If you could just elaborate a little bit for us on micronutrients and the significance of them in our fight against malnutrition.
Thank you, Vaishali. And yes, of course, in all the gross macronutrient problems, sometimes the micronutrients get neglected. The truth is, of course, that before we go to micronutrients, we need to remember that protein deficiency is still very widespread in India and in children, and it's the most important cause of perhaps growth stunting. So we are still struggling with that, with increasing I mean, there has been progress, of course, but we are struggling with protein intakes in children and even in adults. If you look at for example, the if you do muscle mass studies on South Asians versus rest of the world, you will find that our proportion of body fat is much higher and the proportion of lean muscle is much less. So I mean, there's several issues there, but don't forget the protein. But you've asked me specifically about micronutrients, of course, and those are nutrients present in small amounts in our food, which play very important roles in various body processes. And it's important to understand because they may not be clearly visible as deficiencies of protein or calorie may be. They may be more subtle, but their impact can be devastating. So let me start quickly, give you an example of iodine. Let's start with a success story first. Iodine was lacking in Indian soil, in Indian water, for various reasons. We won't go into that. But as a result, what happened that normal Indian diets were lacking in iodine. And through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a bunch of studies that showed that not only does iodine deficiency result in goiter or enlargement of the thyroid gland, but also has a major impact on brain development, particularly in the newborn. So if the mother is deficient in iodine and the newborn is deficient in iodine, they can be grossly mentally retarded, and a huge number of them will be not achieving their mental potential. And there are physical components to it also, but let's just talk of brain retardation. And then what, with the recognition that iodine deficiency is important, and also the recognition that actually it requires only a little pinch of iodine every day. So the government took upon itself to iodate the salt. And without going into much detail, I would say that this was one of the first projects I was involved in studying iodine deficiency as a junior doctor, as a resident medical officer when I was doing my fellowship. So you quite clearly you understand that just adding iodine to salt and ensuring its delivery to a large segment of the population, we don't see those cretins anymore. Otherwise, in eastern UP and parts of Bihar and the Sub-Tarai belt, you would actually find, villages after villages where children were mentally retarded, and it's all gone simply because a micronutrient like iodine reached them. Okay, this is just the quick background, but then there are so many others we are struggling with. We are struggling with iron and iron deficiency anemia. India being the sort of hot spot for that also. I mean, almost more than 50% of children and women may be anemic in India even now. Dr. R.Hemalatha can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's close to that figure. And the truth is that when we were, again, talking on a clinical point, when we were trainees or younger, a hemoglobin level of 11 was considered quite normal and quite good for women actually in India. It's only when you raise the bar, you realize that actually it should be 15 or maybe 14 at least. And then you realize that actually most of the women who were in that zone of 10, 11 hemoglobin, which we thought is, okay, it doesn't matter, really was impacting them in a big way. So iron deficiency. Then we have B12. B12 deficiency is hugely common. And that, of course, stems somewhat from the fact that there is, a lot of us are vegetarian, and B12 primarily comes from animal sources, but even otherwise, the truth is that B12 deficiency, we know, causes nerve damage and anemia, right? And it's present in, animal products mainly, but recent data indicates that prepartum, like before pregnancy, if you're deficient in B12 and remain deficient throughout pregnancy and later on, it leads to low birth weight babies. These are amazing studies done by Dr. Yagnik from Pune, and actually increases the risk of diabetes. So an intervention study is now on where they're supplementing B12 to adolescent girls and following them up through their reproductive life, like at least through the first pregnancy, and seeing the impact on that child that is born, on the birth weight in it. So B12, you have these numerous, you have vitamin A, you have and of course, you have the D story, which we can talk about as we go along, because that maybe requires more elaboration. So the idea is that this is what I call hidden deficiencies. They are not necessarily so overt, but actually they're not that hidden either. And if you look at simple things like hemoglobin or simple things like growth, zinc deficiency manifesting in poor growth, you would actually find that despite correcting macronutrient deficiencies, which many of the more affluent and urban Indians have been able to do, micronutrient deficiencies don't spare even the well-to-do and the urban Indians.
Right. So, I mean, given what we know and what you've elaborated upon, and it's, we've been speaking about it for decades now, I want to ask, what are the best practices that we can adapt today to address these issues, bring micronutrients into focus at a policy level? What strategies, practices can we adapt?
I think the multiple strategies may be needed, and different strategies for different nutrients might be needed. And it's not that I have an answer on, the simple answer that I can just solve this problem. But nevertheless, I mean, there are some strategies people have used in the world. Definitely, I mean, the basic, of course, is awareness and, increase awareness about food and nutrition. And the fact, of course, in those who are economically deprived is to just make it reach them, So in micronutrient, very often you have to just make the nutrient reach the population. How do you do that? How will you do that? I mean, of course, as I said, maybe dietary diversity, maybe using different options of indigenous foods, like calcium as an example, where calcium sources are primarily milk, dairy derived. But there are indigenous products, indigenous herbs and stems, etc., which are used in leaves, and there are studies from tribals in Jharkhand, etc., which have shown that there are actually Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, where they've shown that there are actually different plants that have higher levels of calcium. So I'm just saying that dietary diversification is one option, right? More awareness about dietary diversification. The second, of course, and more availability of optional food. The second, of course, is actually providing either supplements or supplementary mixtures, like Bangladesh does that very well. They have mixes of powders which have all the necessary nutrients, and they are distributed in schools, or they're force-fed in school, or not force-fed, but whatever, under disciplined sort of environment, they're fed. So you ensure delivery to kids. So they've done very well with that. And of course, there is the whole thing about fortification. Right. And fortification, fortunately, has gained a lot of ground in India, and something that we've been struggling with for the past 15 years, at least in the last few years, has really taken off. And we can take many examples. But if I take the example of salt, I already told you with iodine, you can think of iron fortification. You can think of so many others. And one of the most important with that is the fortification with D and A, where you can use milk or edible oil as a vehicle. So fortification has many challenges, so it's not that it's just delivered like that. Voluntary versus mandatory, quality control, monitoring, multiple sources of the nutrient, multiple things fortified, what is actually reaching the person, the amount. So there are lots of issues, but these are the basic strategies that one can use, to combat micronutrient deficiency.
Right. I have a lot more questions for you, Dr. Mithal, but I'm going to come back. I want to take in Rasmi, Avula right now. Rasmi, there's integrated child development services that has done really well for India, and it's been on for the last 4 decades now. But the impact has been uneven. It's not been, it's not been as evenly distributed as we thought it would be. So I wanted to understand from you, do you think we need to overhaul the program right now and rethink how we implement it in India?
Thank you, Vaishali. And first, I would like to congratulate the organizers and thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak about this issue. Integrated Child Development Services, the ICDS program, like you rightly said, it's been on more than 4 decades now. It delivers primarily 6 services through a network of Anganwadi centers at the village level. So while there are 6 services, primarily the ICDS that is delivers the three services that it primarily looks into is the food supplementation, preschool education, and health and nutrition education. The other three services, health checkups, referrals, and immunization, they are delivered in collaboration with the health system. So it offers services for children from 0 to 6 years, pregnant, lactating women. And you're right, the coverage has been variable. In the past decade, between 2006 and 2016, there have been quite a few policy changes. There has been expansion of the ICDS program. The coverage has increased. And if we look at the change, the coverage definitely improved across board, across India. Of course, it has been variable between the states. If we look at the food supplementation service itself, which gives what we call take-home ration for pregnant and lactating women, it's a food supplement, right? And there are hot-cooked meals for children between 3 years to 6 years. So this, the coverage of this program particularly also increased from about, let's say, 18% in 2006 to over 50% in 2016. And I'm talking about all India average. If we take different states, then you'll see a huge variability. For example, states like Odisha and Chhattisgarh have performed extremely well. The coverage has been more than 90%. And if you look at the other services, the coverage of other services is comparatively lower than the food supplementation itself. So one can think about food supplementation as a gateway service, if you will. So if you want the coverage to improve for other services, then get your food supplementation right. Particularly in the, food supplementation is actually a evidence-based intervention, particularly for food insecure populations, right? So, and while it increased in states like Odisha and Chhattisgarh, in states like UP and Bihar, where the poorest population lives and where the needs are more, the coverage is still suboptimal. So we have to ask, if we are thinking of, is it the overhaul or is it improving the existing service coverage and quality? What we know is the coverage has improved. What we don't know is still is the quality of services. So we need to unpack, define what quality of services looks like, and look at how to improve the quality. And coming back to the issue of the food supplements itself, we have to unpack, okay, the coverage has increased, but what is the use of the supplement at the household level? How much are the children or the women consuming it? What does the quality of the food supplement look like? And in states where it is not happening, what are the issues? Is it the accountability issue? Is it the food safety issue? Is it the quality? Why is the coverage so low in some states? So I think improving food supplementation aspect of it we will get a big win. And then the health and nutrition education. That's the key for improving practices at the household level. The behavior change counseling that needs to happen, or that the frontline workers provide, the Anganwadi workers provide. So the coverage of that is still low. So we have to understand why the coverage is low. What are the factors that we can facilitate to help the frontline workers better deliver those services? And then thinking about, can we make the Anganwadi center services aspirational? Is there an Anganwadi center where you can actually bring, it's not just the poor population that is coming in using it, but is it that the children of the village sarpanch, the village pradhan, are they all also congregating? Can this become a vibrant center for bringing together mothers and children, essentially focusing at improving child care and helping in growth and development?
Right, Rasmi, this is something that Dr. Alok Ranjan also talks about in his essay. He calls it the hourglass phenomena. And Dr. Ranjan, you've spoken about integrating or streamlining nutrition-specific and nutrition-sensitive interventions. What do you mean by that? How do you propose we go about doing that?
Yeah, Thanks, Vaishali, for having me on this webinar. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thanks. And wishes to everyone for safe and healthy. Currently, with the whole COVID scenario at this point of time, and also wishing everyone with the World Breastfeeding Week. As you can see in the background, it's 2 is equal to 17, which is like SDG 2, which has nutrition housed within it, contributes to all the 17 SDGs, which all the countries in the world have been focusing on. I feel when you are asking about the nutrition specific and sensitive interventions, I'm a medical doctor. I did my MBBS and did my MD, was working in different areas, not in nutrition, but never had we been prepared for the public health nutrition the way we are working. And believe me, if you look at all the folks who are working in the area of nutrition currently in India, I think most of them have come from different streams, and many people have been working in different aspects of nutrition specific and sensitive, but everyone is contributing to the overall improvement in maternal and child undernutrition, I would say. Few of the aspects which I would kind of highlight around the nutrition specific and sensitive would be like basic priorities which are there at the national level currently, like, keeping girls in school. What does it do if we are able to ensure that all the girls are being kept in the school and they are entering the college for education? Their education, their empowerment, their own capacity and abilities to make their own choices and decisions. It leads to a lot of empowerment, leading to their better health and nutrition going ahead. If you look at the open defecation free drives which is being done in the country and all the districts and every villages at this point of time, it leads to a huge impact in terms of the better gut health, which in fact leads to better nutritional outcome at the same point of time. There's a lot of priority and focus around the family planning aspects, and what it does is that prevents a female from entering into pregnancy too early in her life, knowing as nutrition say that when she enters pregnancy, her own growth spurt kind of stops, and it's all used up for the feeding the growth of the child, as Dr. Ambrish was also highlighting earlier. Dr. Hemalatha was highlighting earlier. And what it does is that too many pregnancies too early and at a gap of very small spacing between these pregnancies lead to her own nutritional status being compromised and that of the offsprings that are coming. Family planning contributes that way. If you look at the other priorities like the self-help group or the Panchayati Raj driven programs that are happening, self-help group itself brings a huge convergence opportunity between agriculture, nutrition, and the livelihood platform. If you look at the PRI, Panchayati Raj, it brings an opportunity of bringing the community-led convergence and accountability that we talk about, the last mile governance and accountability system to be created. Rasmi talked about a lot of health department-driven programs. And when you look at the immunization and care during a wasted child and all, it all contributes to lesser kids being malnourished and framing them from that vicious circle. One of the systems, I would say the food systems, which is agriculture and nutrition system coming together, is something which is very critical and key in terms of, as Dr. Mithal said, that he started with the protein deficiency being called out, how agriculture can really contribute in terms of making all those macro and the micronutrients being available through our agriculture work at this point of time. Safe drinking water, which is a new priority, which is being put, there's a lot of weight being put behind it. I think if you look at that, safe drinking water, it itself brings in the reduces the chances of infection and subsequently the whole again the vicious cycle of child becoming infected and undernourished. So that's where I kind of phrased it as an hourglass phenomenon, where whatever be the component that you're looking at in an upper half of an hourglass, it all comes together at a point where it goes from one chamber of the hourglass to the other chamber, and that's where the mother and child nutritional and health diet comes into picture. And for a mother and a child diet, they might be undernourished because of multiple factors, and you cannot pinpoint to start with. It would be only these factors. Multiple factors played together in terms of bringing about that whole component. So whichever area we work on, it can help us in bringing that impact. Over. Sorry,
I realized I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
So right. So you've also spoken about, growing local food, micronutrient-rich food, focusing on, local nutrition for children to optimize and to meet malnutrition goals. If you can talk to us a little bit about the Ministry of Women and Child Development's Bharatiya Poshan Krishi Kosh. What is it that they're trying to achieve? If you just talk to us a little bit about that. Okay, now I can't hear you.
Sorry, I kept myself on mute this time. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Okay, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, please.
So I feel one of the aspects that all of us in the nutrition are really grappling with is the whole diet diversity. And this is not just for the children. I feel even if you look at the maternal diet, it's quite poor in terms of the diet diversity. If you look at the children's diet, 6 months onward, complementary feeding needs to be started. And if you look at the latest Ministry of Health and UNICEF survey, the CNNS survey, it does give you that that number is only around 6.7% of kids in the age group of 6 months to 23 months, where their nutritional requirement, energy requirement, and nutrient requirement increases quite a lot. Only 6.7% of kids in India in this age group have all the adequate food groups that are needed by them. And interestingly, when you look at the wealthiest quintile, there also this number is only in the single digits. There also it is less than 10%. So somewhere it tells us that it's not only about the availability, but it's also about the knowledge and awareness in terms of what's to be fed. But there are a few things that can be prioritized in terms of availability as well. If you look at the Bharatiya Krishi Poshan Bharatiya Poshan Krishi Kosh, which is the Poshan Atlas, which is being developed. It is kind of a regional agri-food database to help advance the goals of Poshan Abhiyan, where WCD is creating a database to link comprehensive information on what foods are traditionally consumed in which geography, what crop varieties are currently grown in those areas, and giving the agroecological content around the groundwater availability, soil organic content, and others, guidance on how a greater diversity of crops could be encouraged in a particular district to promote diet diversity and nutrition. This is something which will cover what we hear is around 127 different agroclimatic zone. And it has a huge convergence happening between the WCD and the Agriculture Ministry to come together. So it is very exciting and encouraging because we don't have this kind of a mechanism in other geographies and other countries that we can kind of currently draw down upon greatly. So it's really very encouraging to see ministry and interministerial collaboration. When you talk about nutrition specific and sensitive in the previous question, this is a great example of how ministries are coming together in terms of using their data, using their information to make local solutions for based on their local geographical aspects and factors kept in mind. Over.
Right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to all the panelists with a couple of follow-up questions, and then we open it up to our audience. So those of you who have questions for us, please do put them in our Q&A box there at the bottom, and I'll take them at the end of this round. So Dr. R.Hemalatha, I lost you last time. Can I come back? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, lovely. So I wanted to talk to you about, in your article, you focused on non-communicable diseases like, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, which is India has such a massive burden of these diseases already. And, I wanted you to talk to us about the malnutrition connect. You always think of malnutrition as a poor man's problem. But communicable diseases hold a higher burden of death in this country already. And so if you could just talk to us a little bit about the connection between malnutrition and non-communicable diseases. Could you hear me?
Oh, with non-communicable disease. Yeah.
Right.
Non-communicable disease, diabetes, ischemic heart disease. See, cardiovascular diseases mean that which are connected to diet, that is, ischemic heart, stroke, cancers, etc., contribute immensely to the economic burden of the family as well as the country. And the daily rates in India, overall that is disease burden in the country has decreased 36% from 1990 to 2000. But daily rates of disease burden due to chronic heart disease, diabetes, and stroke has increased considerably over the years, that is in the last few decades. So if you look at the data also, the NIN study itself and also other studies have clearly shown that there is epidemic proportion of increasing overweight, obesity, and also abdominal obesity, visceral obesity, increasing waist circumference, both among women and men, and also not only just urban areas but also rural areas as well. And here, of course, you have to think that our dietary habits have extremely been poor. If you see across India, right from urban to rural areas and tribal regions, if you collect the data, NNB data as well as NSSO data, the intake of protein and micronutrient rich foods is very, very low. The intake is very low across the urban, rural and tribal regions. So how do you expect healthy, if the lifestyle is not healthy, you cannot expect health. So very few people realize this, even among the educated who live along the rural regions. So micronutrient deficiencies are associated. I mean, it has been shown that micronutrient deficiencies are associated with inflammation, including important amino acids and also important fatty acids. They are linked with inflammation, and inflammation is the underlying pathogenesis of the increasing epidemic of all this, most of the non-communicable diseases. And if you take the data, about 30 to 40% of our population, even the young adults, have high inflammation in their body. And this is contributing immensely. It's like a silent killer, which is increasing or predisposing us to increased episodes of ischemic heart disease, stroke, etc. If you see globally, we in India develop these diseases at much younger age compared to the rest of the population in the world, about 8 to 10 years earlier. And if you look at the mortality rates of CVDs and diabetes, particularly coronary heart disease deaths, it is much high, it's occurring at much younger age in India compared to the rest of the population in the world. So this is the mechanism, how inflammation is connected, how poor dietary habits is connected to inflammation, and this inflammation is increasing insulin resistance. And inflammation, apart from increasing insulin resistance, it is also increasing ectopic fat deposition, visceral adiposity. And if you look at the data, our own data, 50% of the urban population and about 30%, a third of the rural region people have abdominal adiposity, central adiposity. In men, it is about more than 90 centimeters if you take the circumference, and in women, it is about more than 80 centimeters. So even overall, if you are not obese, overall, if you are not overweight, the central adiposity and ectopic fat deposition resulting from inflammation, resulting from poor intake of micronutrients and essential amino acids and all, is resulting in this silent underlying chronic inflammation and insulin resistance, which is predisposing us to increased episodes of increased epidemic of this coronary heart disease, stroke, diabetes, etc. If you look at the data, it is 25 to 30% of the population in India suffer from cardiovascular hypertension, and about a little less proportion, about 50 to 20%, suffer from type 2 diabetes. And it is much higher in urban areas, but then it is not that it is not there in rural regions and tribal regions. There also it is existing. The reason could be, again, micronutrient deficiencies, and also salt intake is also contributing. Higher salt intake as well. So if we have, what is worrying is 80% of these diseases are preventable. Most of these are preventable. It is within our own hands. If only we change our dietary habits, if only we change our lifestyles, behaviors, like for example, improving the physical activity. Globally, if you see, India is one where physical activity is extremely low. 70% of our population is sedentary. Can you believe that? So dietary habits are poor, physical activity is low, and then along with that, if you also abstain from, limit alcohol and smoking, alcohol consumption, smoking, all these diseases are preventable. It is within our hands. And also, changes can happen if only we impact the policy. At policy level, changes have to come. Then at agriculture level, changes have to come. And at consumer level also, behavior change, communication, and so all these three different levels can definitely bring about change. I mean, when 80% can be preventable, it is really, really very depressing to realize that it is not happening. But there are different stakeholders have to come together to contain this. Thank you.
Right. I want to bring in Dr. Ambrish Mithal here. Dr. Mithal, since we're talking about deficiencies, it's been proposed that replenishing vitamin D in deficient individuals will also give them some protection from COVID-19. And, as Dr. Hemalatha also spoke about the fact that, 80% of these diseases are preventable, and the fact that we have a very, very sedentary lifestyle, all of that contributes to deficiencies that we face. If you could talk to us a little bit more about the vitamin D connect and, your thoughts on this observation re COVID-19.
So vitamin D deficiency is widespread in India. It's present in different degrees in different segments of the population. So for example, if you move from north to south, then the deficiency decreases, the level improves as you come closer to the equator. As you move up north, there is a little bit more of a deficiency. As you move from crowded urban metros, where there is so much air pollution that the UV beta rays of the sun don't reach your skin, if you move from there to the open fields or villages, you will find that the D deficiency is less in rural areas. Having said that, the truth is that overall vitamin D deficiency, particularly in urban areas and particularly in urban office-going people like us, doctors, people, executives, most people now work in offices or work from home these days, of course, but nevertheless, they are indoor. So the only people who've had normal D levels, or I would say respectable D levels in the metros are, for example, the study which one of my friends did, which looked at people who are like rickshaw pullers, manual construction site workers, the guys who are in sun all day and don't even have enough to cover. So why are Indians deficient, and what is the story of vitamin D? In 2 lines. One is that there is no vitamin D in diet. So we have to understand that for practical purposes, the amount of vitamin D in diet is negligible. And all these write-ups you see in different columns of fake nutritionists writing what food contains vitamin D and everything is actually all fake. There's no significant source of vitamin D in the natural food. That has been studied extensively. Now, the other thing is that the correct source, or the source of vitamin D is sunshine. And sunshine is abundant in India, so one would think that it's completely crazy to expect that Indians would be D deficient. But actually what happens is that we have stopped going in the sun, as I was hinting earlier. We don't go in the sun. We often, much of sort of upwardly mobile India is confined indoors in air-conditioned environments. There is no sunlight exposure. And of course, when we do go in the sun, culturally, we tend to keep ourselves more covered than other populations. We require a longer duration of exposure to sunlight because that is a natural process of evolution. Our skins are pigmented. As you move towards the equator, skin becomes dark. It protects you from excessive sun, but at the same time, you require that exposure to make vitamin D. So if you have 2 different colors, there's 6 types of skin, but forget that as far as vitamin D synthesis is concerned. So if you have a Boris Becker kind of skin, you probably will make enough vitamin D just strolling on the streets in India very quickly. But we don't. So there is an issue there. And the very important point here is that pollution, atmospheric pollution, has been shown to be really a deterrent to the UV beta rays reaching our skin. And therefore, even if there is sunlight, as it used to be when we were younger, and you used to play, at least in winter, you play outside. Nowadays, in experiments done in Delhi on school children, when they were exposed to 1 hour of sunlight every day, in the 30 minutes, of sunlight every day in schools, there was no change in their D level. This is at 12 noon. Okay, because the sunlight exposure you require is between 11 a.m. and say 3 p.m. And yet that didn't happen. In summer, it went up a little bit. In winter, there was no change at all. So there are multiple factors that make us deficient, and the diet is not a big source. We should learn from others, what others have done. They add vitamin D to different vehicles. The most popular one being milk. And milk, because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin and can easily be added to milk or milk products. And because milk has calcium, it somehow makes a nice cocktail for your bone. Why is vitamin D important for us? It's important because it absorbs the calcium, helps absorb the calcium, and helps us to build bone. So therefore, fortification of milk, and in India, of edible oil, has been seriously initiated as a voluntary measure. It's not mandatory. As a voluntary measure where people, companies can do that, firms can do that, corporations can do that, and they are. Many of them are. So we expect to see a change. The primary role of vitamin D is in preserving our bone and muscle health, right? But there is other roles also. And let's talk of very briefly COVID and vitamin D. What happens in COVID? Firstly, your sunlight exposure usually goes down. Mine increased actually, but mostly it goes down because I could go on the terrace or something, you know. So sunlight exposure has gone down for most people. They don't go out at all. So that is one. Secondly, of course, as I said, unless you're having fortified food with that F mark, you probably won't get much vitamin D. And even if you have fortified food, that alone may not be sufficient in sufficient amounts at the moment to take care of it. Now, not only will that, of course, have an impact on your bone and muscle health, but there is also some evidence that vitamin D has a role in many other things, including our immunity. And if you're seriously deficient in vitamin D, which means levels of below 10 nanogram per ml, if you're in that zone, then you actually are more prone to respiratory tract infections. A study published a couple of years ago, a meta-analysis actually in the British Medical Journal, clearly showed that in people who are significantly or seriously deficient in vitamin D, they have a higher risk of respiratory infections and possibly poor outcomes from infections also. This could be linked. So you have to look at it that if you have a population, in our most recent database analyzing that, we are studying vitamin D in COVID actually these days. The data is all ready, and now today the data acquisition has stopped and we're going to analyze it now. So, but the first instance, roughly 1/4 of people getting hospitalized for COVID are below 10 nanogram, even now. So it is thought, we don't know if they have worse outcome in this study, but it is thought that when you are deficient, you will have worse outcome. That is one part of the vitamin D story. Therefore, it is logical to correct it, but there is no absolute proof that bringing it up to a particular level at this stage will make any difference, you know, when patient is sick or something. If the population vitamin D improves, it probably will have an impact on overall prevalence. The second extended role of vitamin D, which is still not proven in the clinical sense, is that people think it's using higher doses of vitamin D can be anti-inflammatory and can actually reduce the cytokine storm and all. But I think that is very interesting, but it's not really finally proven yet. So I would stick to the fact not treating vitamin D as a drug, but as a nutrient, as it's supposed to be, and at least ensuring that we are not deficient in vitamin D, not just to preserve our bones and muscle, but also possibly to protect ourselves from respiratory infections and others. And there are a lot of other things. Vitamin D has been associated with deficiency, with cancer, with metabolic disease. Dr. R.Hemalatha was talking about non-communicable diseases like that. Even they have been associated, but those are all still sort of, still the jury is still out. I mean, it's not final.
Right, I'm going to come back and I'm going to ask you about that study that you've just spoken about and get to know more about it. I also worry as a parent to see seeing two of my kids locked up at home for the last 6 months and very little exposure to sunlight. So that's a serious concern for parents and for young kids as well. So I'm going to come back to you about that and ask you more questions about that later. I wanted to move on to Rasmi right now. Rasmi, you've spoken about technological interventions and data tools to deliver and track progress of nutrition schemes and programs. We've heard of those smartphones being delivered to ASHA workers. If you can talk to us about how technology can be better accessed to improve our malnutrition outcomes.
So recently, there has been the ICDS. There was a technology intervention that got introduced. It's called the Real-Time Monitoring CAS, Common Application Software, the ICDS CAS. And what it did is it gave a smartphone. It's a smartphone-based application which digitized the 11 registers that the Anganwadi workers who used to manually fill all those. They were all digitized and alongs into the smartphone application. Along with it, there was a web-based application, which was a dashboard that provides real-time information at the higher levels from block, district, and above. So what this did is that it has enabled the frontline workers to schedule their home visits, because the application has several features. And one of it is it enables the frontline worker to track beneficiaries easily, because it generates due lists for vaccination. So now the frontline worker doesn't have to look at things manually to figure out who is due on for a vaccination or not. It keeps track of it keeps track of home visits for the frontline worker, who should be visited at what time, and it generates alerts for the frontline worker. And then the growth monitoring, that is one of the key services that are delivered at the ICDS center. Frontline workers can actually enter the data or measurements into the system, and it automatically plots the child's growth chart. So all these features have enabled are kind of a job aid for the frontline worker. In addition, there are videos embedded in the application. When the frontline worker goes to visit homes, she can actually use them for counseling the beneficiaries. So this particular automation of data helped Anganwadi workers to reduce the workload for them, and they actually there's this enthusiasm of actually getting a new application in their hand, which has not happened in the past 40 years. And if we could think about the lady supervisors who are their boss at the block sector level, they used to originally go to each Anganwadi worker, collect what we call monthly progress report, which again the frontline worker has to prepare. And then they would collate that, digitize it, and then that used to get to the block level. Now with this application, that level of digitization is taken care of. Now the lady supervisors don't have to actually do that manually, just sitting and entering the data, but it's automatically upgraded because the monthly progress report gets generated in the application and it gets collated at the back end. And so now at the block level, the ICDS staff do not have to again generate reports. It's all there on the dashboard. So essentially what is helping is the data are automatically collated. It's now the focus can be on the use of data and how that can be used to improve the service delivery. So, and they are slowly starting to look at the dashboards at different levels and decide what indicators to monitor, and then bring back mainly to, the data have to be used not to see whether it's collating up and moving up the chain, but actually to use it to improve the service delivery aspect. So with the manual aspect taken out, focus can be brought in on focusing on the specifics of service delivery and improvements. So this started around 2017, and now I think more than 5 lakh Anganwadi workers are actually using this, and it is an integral part of the Poshan Abhiyan program. So yeah, it's that's one of the aspects when we were talking about reforms. That's one of the aspects that I can actually bring in efficiency at the frontline worker as a job aid and help her deliver the services.
Right. I have the same question for both Mr. Arjan and for Dr. Alok Ranjan. We do know that the COVID-19 has impacted India's nutrition goals. Now, what can we do today to mitigate that impact? How do we reduce that impact and the fallout of it on child health and infant mortality rates? If Mr. Arjan could speak first.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to highlight a new initiative which was just launched a few days ago, shared publicly through this website of the Coalition of Food and Nutrition Security. And I will paste the link here for you. It is a commitment to action. Scientists, academia, development partners, NGOs, civil society have come together in the last I think about 1 month, 2 months, to exactly look at the question that you have asked there. How are we not going to lose all the efforts made, all the impact made in the last years when it comes to nutrition due to COVID? What needs to be done? And initially they were talking about a call to action. And then actually they realized, wait a minute, we shouldn't call others to action, we should call ourselves to action. It's a commitment to action. And there are actually 6 key points, 6 key areas that have been identified. And let me just go through them very, very briefly. The first one is, I mentioned that earlier, the power of Posh and Arjan has been its leadership from the top, but all the way the leadership also of Anganwadi workers, ASHA workers, and communities themselves, leadership of parents to make a change. So it's really about, can we sustain this leadership? Can we get this inspiration, this guidance back and having that trickling down again? So that's the first one. The second one is this set of high impact interventions that we know that work. The supplementation of iron folate tablets, the vitamin A, the counseling on breastfeeding, the counseling on feeding of the very young child, take-home rations. Can we get it back? Can we get it back to levels, at least at the level of January, February, and then from there we'll have to improve even further again. The third one was adequate funding. Posh and Arjan had come with additional funding. Already at that time it was not enough. And we know at the moment that there is not enough money because there's so many priorities at the moment, including COVID. But can we protect and even expand the resources for the nutrition response under COVID? So that's the third one. The fourth one brings together the set of interventions that also particularly Alok was talking about, because nutrition is not only about giving good food and giving the nutrients or supplements. It's also about addressing gender issue, delaying pregnancies. It's about safe drinking water. So that set of broader program responses, the convergent areas, the indirect nutrition impact responses and programs. That's the fourth area. The fifth area, and that's very much building what Rasmi has also been talking about, the power of evidence and nutrition. We need to know what's going on. I already mentioned that it seems like that some of the small data we have, and we don't have all the data, and that's sometimes a bit worrying, because if you don't have the data, you don't know exactly what the problem is and where the problem is the largest. We have some data suggesting that some services have come back, but we don't know yet what the coverage is. Yeah, maybe the cover services are there, but the coverage seems to be lagging behind. So we need to have a continued investment in data systems and having that data out frequently, not once a month or once a year through surveys. I mean, at this stage, you need more frequent data, at least every quarter, every 3 months, or some data maybe even more frequently. You need to know what is going on. So identify places with fires starting so you can go there and address it. So that was the fifth area. And the sixth area is this holistic system of strengthening nutrition systems. It's about the food systems and the food supply systems. It's about the health system, all the building blocks of a functioning health system. It's about the social protection system. It's about the various community systems that we're having. And a lot of investment is available through COVID and also addressing these systems. But when we do that, let's keep in mind that these systems are also solid enough to bring the other components. So this this commitment to action has just been put on the website, and you can see here the link to the Nutrition Coalition that has been a great facilitator also of this process, besides many of the other partners, is putting this out and now is saying, hey, people join this. And which people? It's about not just academia, it's not about the development parties, it's about the journalists, it's about any change maker, it's about you, it's about me, because we are all change maker within our own environment. We all want that nutrition works for children. So great initiative, and we hope that this will help us to highlight the key areas, because that's what your question was. What are the key issues? Well, if we work on these 6 key issues, not much needs to be lost, and actually we might getting out of it in 1 or 2 years even better than where we were before COVID. Thank you very much.
Right.
Alok, over
right.
to
So the link. Right. So I'm going to get Alok in just very quickly. The link that Mr. Arjan was talking about, it's nutritioncoalition.org.in, and so you guys can go and look it up and get to know more about what we just spoke. Now over to Alok. Dr. Ranjan, if you can talk about what strategies we can adopt to prevent the situation from getting worse.
Sure. Thanks for the question. And I would just build upon what Arjan was saying, because these 6 action points that came in the commitment to action is something that I would say all the nutrition stakeholders are quite aligned on this whole mechanism. But to your question, like, can we kind of, use this scenario to strengthen the various aspects of the nutrition programming? Answer is absolutely, we can do that. And nutrition, which one of my mentor on nutrition, he always used to call it with 4 words. It's invisible, it's orphan, it's unmeasured, and it's voiceless. So these are the 4 characteristics he used to always give nutrition in how nutrition has been a problem statement. And there is a risk of all these being augmented in this current scenario around how there is a lot of priorities that can go into other aspects, and nutrition can have a lesser priority. So everyone needs to commit to action for nutrition that way. So let me call out 2-3 examples in terms of what we are seeing currently. I think hand washing. In last 6 months, the amount of hand washing that must have happened in the world would be more than what has happened in last 5 years in terms of the number of people and number of times it has been done, right? If you multiply it by that, every time hand wash is being done. And this is something which is a huge contributory factor in terms of the nutrition outcome as well. And it has been a common, consistent message in every nutrition training, hand washing before food for kids, when you're feeding the child and all that. So here is something that it's happening. Let's build on that momentum and let's not wear it out. Everything that you see in COVID right now, masks, wearing of mask or everything, it's all a behavior change perspective. And if you look at the 1,000-day journey of mother and child, it's all behavior change, whether breastfeeding, complementary feeding, either when iron folic acid is supplied, then consumption of that, maternal diet diversity, a lot is related to behavior change. So how can we learn at this point of time with the new normal and the whole scenario changing and shifting in terms of what will it take over here? And last example in terms of what's happening currently is when I go to grocery store to buy something, first things off the shelf are the most nutritious components right now. Like in the vegetables, the Avula, the lemon, the green leafy vegetables, these are finishing absolutely early because everyone is asking and demanding for this, so that it helps build their immunity and helps build their body strengthening better. So I think these are the things that we can as a nutrition community really harness upon and make it for our advantage as we go ahead. In terms of the changes that would be critical, just to add upon what Arjan was saying, I think various systems need to be strengthened. There is the health system, the agriculture, food systems, and other systems that you talk about. But I think what nutrition has been missing is the whole system strengthening approach. Everyone that you talk about to health has been talking about a health system strengthening. This is being followed country by country. They are looking at health system strengthening. There are WHO 6 buckets under which they are working, whether HR strengthening, fund flow, infrastructure, supply chain, and other things. In nutrition, we don't talk about this. Most of the interaction happens frontline worker delivering the message to the beneficiaries or the household. Nobody talks about the bottlenecks that are there above that service provider and client level. Everything that lies above that, which needs to be those unclogging all those bottlenecks, is critical. And I think we can use this opportunity to help and plan and think that way, where the entire nutrition system strengthening approach could be brought very similar to the health system strengthening. You also talked about the infrastructure. I'm a bit we should focus more on the soft skill, because it's very easy to go towards let's build this facility, let's do that. Those are visible, but the change would come when we are able to change the household practices of feeding and other aspects, which requires a softer building capacity, counseling happening at the right time, at the right messaging and all. few aspects which I'll add in the end is like the way India has tackled programs like polio routine immunization, where you see that district magistrate reviews the program. It's a data-based review. I think nutrition, it has been always talked about, it will be reviewed, but it doesn't get really reviewed at the district magistrate level. And unless he or she reviews nutrition program, down below, it is never taken as a priority because, oh, our DM is not prioritizing it, so it doesn't get done at the level below that. So that use of data, Rasmi talked about the whole CAS software, huge amount of data there. How does data gets used every level in terms of at the district and block and for Anganwadi herself using that data is very critical. And convergence, when you talked about the nutrition specific and sensitive intervention, there is a lot of talk happening about convergence action plan. They are being prepared and templates are there. But for the mother and child, where all these services has to come and converge at the household level, that convergence needs to be strengthened. And unless we do that, the impact would be quite less. And last, your PDS system gives you opportunities like, can we diversify the PDS? Social safety net program gives you opportunity. Can we use fortified products in those? So similarly, all the programs, existing flagship programs gives huge amount of opportunities, and we can use it for strengthening the nutrition program going ahead. Over.
Right. So we are very, very short of time, but I do want to take some questions that have come in. A lot of them from Dr. Srinivas Kuntur, Professor Dr. Srinivas Kuntur from Tirupati. So his question is, what is the role of traditional foods of India in combating malnutrition? Dr. Mithal, would you like to take this question?
I could, but I think Dr. Hemalatha will do it.
Dr. Hemalatha? Okay, over to you, Dr. Hemalatha. So I'm going to repeat the question for you. The role of traditional foods in India in combating malnutrition.
Yeah. We have to, yes, traditional foods will play a major role, but because of the transition, this escalating epidemic of non-communicable diseases, particularly coronary heart and other diseases including diabetes and stroke. The transition that's occurring in food system in India, diversity is totally eroded, getting eroded. The reason could be many, but we are moving from traditional foods to modern day foods, which are available across, not only in urban areas, even in regions. If you traditionally go back and see, a part of our food used to be always for foods like milk. Now it is slowly disappearing. And also, well-to-do families, the root, if you go to those well-to-do families, you see the plate would be full of varieties of vegetables, colorful vegetables. And even if you go back to our puja systems in India, you look at whatever you offer to the god, actually, if you think back, quite nutritious and wholesome. And it is not processed at all. You just pick up pujas and throughout the season, if you offer gods, if you go back to the roots, you see, they are very wholesome diets. I mean, they used to offer nutritious diets to the god. The reason is that is what we are supposed to consume. Yes, our traditional diets have a major role to combat and help in solving our disease problem. So fermented fruits and vegetables include liberal amounts of beans. Beans we have totally forgotten. Pulse, we take only one variety. Why not take all the varieties of beans, including chickpeas, beans, cowpea, that is lobia, green gram. We just stick to one clear dal. Take varieties of dals, pulses, beans. They are all rich in not only amino acids, but also very, very rich in varieties of micronutrients. And also include liberal, at least required amount of seafoods, particularly fatty fish, where you get lots of good fatty acids. That is also missing. And in those days, oils we used to use less oils, but more of varieties of foods. But now we use more oils in the food. That only one variety. We don't switch to other varieties. Just one type of oil we use. Diversity is very, very important. And that diversity is slowly eroding. I'm telling you, it is eroding. Not only even among the poor. Because now the poor, I'm sorry to say, they get lots of cereals. And they don't go out and look for varieties. They are happy taking whatever is, I would like to say. And they used to out and take varieties. Now that is missing.
Right.
So diversity of food is getting eroded in the
Absolutely.
roots and traditional food. Thank you.
Right. I'm very, very short of time. I'm going to take one more question and then we'll close this wonderful discussion. This question is the potential of civil society organizations in India to combat malnutrition. Are there any case studies in this regard? I think there are several of them. Would Alok, Ranjan like to talk about this?
Thanks, Vaishali. So I think in terms of when I look at the civil society organizations, I look at an entire spectrum, right from the organizations which are doing evaluation work to the organization we are doing field level implementation, to the partners who are doing technical support and assistance, to the philanthropies and donors who are supporting a lot of these activities. What is key, I would say, is to work with the national and state government in terms of the priorities jointly discussed and prioritized with them, and with a kind of a co-ownership of the entire program, and doing things and supporting things in a very sustainable and scalable manner is very critical. I think long back we had heard one of our development sector person talk about what we bring into nutrition sector in India is just peanut compared to what government of India brings through its various programs for nutrition. So it's a very small amount, but we can make it into a golden peanut where we can help gap around things, whether it's in terms of developing new evidence, in terms of bringing kind of a newer focus on things like if you're talking about the quality of nutrition interventions of household convergence, then testing and trying out these components. If you look at the commitment to action, where everyone has come together with a kind of a common voice around 6 overarching themes, these are all the things where the development sector and the civil society organizations, if they are aligned and have a common kind of a storyline, they can help strengthen the agenda for the government to deliver on nutrition programs, rather than kind of dragging into different direction and breaking the whole mandate into different subcomponents. I would say the opportunity is immense. And here also, as you can see, that we all are coming from different aspects of the nutrition programming section, but I think alignment is there very strongly in terms of what we all can collectively drive. Over.
Right. Thanks. I know Dr. Mithal has to leave. I don't know if he's already left. If we just get his closing remarks on this, and if he has a message for someone, a specific message regarding nutrition for someone, and who that person would be.
You're asking me?
Right. Yes, Dr. Mithal.
Okay.
Yes.
No,
I'm catching you before you leave.
Yes. I think it's important to realize the picture overall. I think in very clinical lines, if I can say that our diet is too carbohydrate based, and because basically when we moved from being nomads to actually living in cities, we started cultivation. Cultivation was the main reason why humanity survived, otherwise people would have died. Now that cultivation was of wheat, for example, in India, I was reading, has been around for 10,000 years. Or some people say 6,000, but most people say 10,000. So if you are looking at these grains and cereals, which are very important for survival, at the same time, they do not have optimum nutrition alone. If they become your main diet, and if they are processed the way they are in modern times, they lose a lot of their fiber and all the good minerals and vitamins, and you're left mainly with carbohydrates. So my thing is that in struggling to control people's weight and diabetes and other things, carbohydrates are some of our main enemies. And also, even in traditional diets, affluent Indian traditional diets, I don't necessarily think they were healthy. I don't know how far we go back in tradition. India has such a long history. If you offer to the gods, Dr. R.Hemalatha, you offer a lot of sweets. And if some of you don't know that actually India was the first place, according to the Oxford History of Food, where sugar was developed. So when Alexander's army came to India, they found this strange white crystals coming out of a reed-like structure after drying the secretions. It's documented. And they took that back to Europe, and actually till then they were only using honey. So India has a long sort of history with diabetes and obesity. Sorry. So anyway, so the key point is that we need to be balanced. We need to add much more fiber in our diets. We need to make sure that we need to add protein. And in our fight between this and that kind of protein or this, once I wrote that if you have more non-vegetarian food, you may choose not to, that's your choice, but you get more protein. Even that people found offensive. But that's fact, right? I mean, I can't change that. So you need good protein sources in the diet, more fiber, less carbohydrate, and less of refrying and trans fats in the food, as Dr. Hemalatha was referring to for NCDs. On the one hand, for micronutrients, we need a thought out plan. Some of it is happening already. We need fortification. We need supplementation for vulnerable groups. In this period of COVID, if people are not able to get enough sunshine and there's not enough fortified food, there is no harm. For example, for vitamin D, to take 1,000 to 2,000 units of vitamin D per day without any test. The problem is we like to test and we take lots of vitamin D and then get into trouble. We need small doses. It's a nutrient and it'll take care. So those kind of strategies will have to work. And anyway, thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to this body of experts. I'm really not an expert here, but I'm just a doctor who has an interest in endocrine metabolic disease and a lot of interest in nutrition, but purely as a clinician. So.
Right. It's a pleasure.
And vitamin D has been, of course, my thing for a long time. Yeah.
Right. So, thank you so much, Dr. Mithal. I'm afraid we've completely run out of time. I would have loved to hear from all the panelists once again, but I'm afraid I'll have to close. There's so many learnings in the conversation we've had, and from COVID itself. Wash your hands. Don't stop washing your hands the second COVID pandemic begins to disappear. Continue to be healthy. Live healthy, exercise, all of that, and this all has an impact on nutrition and on health systems. So don't let go of the learnings you've had through this pandemic. I'm afraid I can't come to everyone, but I do want to go to Nidhi Dubey, who's been with us through this conversation and who made this seminar issue happen. Nidhi is with GHS. Nidhi, I want to hear your closing remarks before we wrap up.
Thank you, and what an informative session. I'd really like to begin by thanking everyone for taking out the time to be part of this webinar, for the experts for sharing their insights, and to those who are listening in. And I'm so glad that GHS and Quint could bring this together. So it's really, really heartwarming. I mean, what is clear from the discussion today that the benefits of addressing malnutrition in a systematic and holistic manner will have benefits for lifetime. So like Arjan mentioned, the launch of the flagship Poshan Abhiyan was a landmark moment in India's fight against malnutrition. And like Dr. Alok Ranjan highlighted, the significance of convergence among various nutrition-specific and nutrition-linked schemes across the country, monitoring at the district level and use of data. If I can quote a stat, 1/3 of the 2 billion micronutrient deficient individuals live in India. Now, this goes on to show how woefully unaware we are of what we eat and what we consume. Dr. Ambrish Mithal gave us so many suggestions and interesting insights on, encouraging uptake of proven solutions like dietary diversity, food fortification, and like Dr. Rasmi talked about, health and nutrition education, behavior change communications, technological innovations. So some great ideas there. As someone who comes from gender background, I'd like to emphasize on maternal and adolescent girl nutrition. As Dr. Hemalatha talked about so beautifully, that while we focus on pregnant women and new mothers, but taking a gendered perspective on nutrition also means going beyond the first 1,000 days and focusing on nutrition of adolescent girls and women at different life stages. Very quickly on seminar, our focus was really to break down malnutrition, to highlight many facets and forms of it. So for this, we brought together some of these experts. Some of them, you heard them today, and it's been like amazing, fantastic experience, and especially, highlighting the interlinkages with issues such as non-communicable disease, gender issues, lack of sanitation and hygiene, and agriculture. Now, the aim was really to bring challenges, solutions, and best practices to public and policy discourse, for which we are very grateful to seminar. I'm grateful to all the speakers for making time today, and last but most significantly, grateful to Quint for this partnership to bring this fantastic session live. I really hope that the webinar today will take this some significant information, strategies for some future learnings. And thank you all. Hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Hemalatha, Rasmi, Arjan, Alok, and Dr. Mithal for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, Vaishali. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.